Welcome to the deep dive. You're here because you want to get a handle on complex stuff, fast and deep, right? Think of this as your shortcut, understanding big ideas without feeling totally swamped. Today we're digging into a lesson that looks at, well, the links between ancient philosophy, modern science, and this really key idea of energy.
Yeah, it's quite something how the lesson frames it. It talks about these two um, almost like factions of expression. You've got these ancient fundamentalisms on one side.
Right, the old ways of thinking.
Exactly. Thousands of groups, apparently just in the U.S., religious, theosophical, occult, all stemming from older philosophies. And then the other side is advanced material science, focused on the physical.
Problems, elements, lab tests.
Precisely. And the lesson really highlights this kind of disconnect between them. It suggests scientists, while maybe deeply spiritual in their own way, often see the ancient stuff as more like legends, not quite real explanations.
Okay, so that's the setup. And our mission, so to speak, for this deep dive.
Well, it's to understand the missing link, as the lesson puts it, which it says is accepting spiritual sciences and understanding the crucial role of energy.
Energy as the bridge. And the lesson offers a unique angle, doesn't it? Influenced by figures like Leonardo da Vinci, even.
That's right. It hints at that broader perspective. The lesson starts by kind of setting a historical scene for spiritual thought. It notes that humanity seems to be at a critical point.
Needing new understanding.
Yes, similar to past crises when, avatars or masters supposedly appeared. And it mentions again that sheer number of ancient traditions, those 9,000 or so in the U.S., showing how deep these roots go.
Okay, so that's the ancient side. Now, the scientific view as presented in the lesson.
The focus there is definitely on the tangible. Atomic weights, the 100-odd elements, lab testing, provable formulas. That's the world of modern science described here.
And the lesson's take is that scientists, while, respecting nature.
Right. They often see the ancient religious ideas as legendary. That's the word used.
It's interesting. And it points out that physical science is pretty young, relatively speaking.
Yeah, mostly less than 100 years old in its current form, which gives some perspective, doesn't it? And the core argument is that science, right now, lacks this acceptance of spiritual sciences as being essential. That's the missing piece, according to the lesson.
So were there attempts to sort of bridge this gap earlier on?
The lesson does talk about that. It mentions clairvoyance, mediums, the spiritualist churches.
People exploring beyond the five senses.
Exactly. Exploring man's higher senses, as the lesson terms it. And also parapsychology, like the Rhines at Duke University, trying to study ESP scientifically.
Right, those experiments. So initial explorations, maybe not mainstream, but showing that interest was there.
Definitely. A desire to look beyond the purely physical.
Now, the lesson also takes a pretty critical look at fundamental Christianity. What's the perspective there?
It suggests it's become internally conflicted and kind of distant from what it portrays as Jesus' original simpler message focused on the inner self.
The kingdom within idea.
Precisely. And it brings up historical context, like Christianity becoming official under Constantine centuries after Jesus. It draws parallels with Buddhism and Zoroastrianism, getting state acceptance later, too.
And there's that kind of paradoxical idea mentioned?
Ah, yes, that maybe Orthodox Christians know less about their own religion's deeper roots than outsiders.
Because they rely only on certain Bible interpretations.
Right, and maybe tend to try and dominate other belief systems, rather than seeing the connections. The lesson suggests this reliance solely on extractions limits understanding.
And it traces Christianity's roots further back.
It does. Back to occultism in the Near and Far East. It mentions Abraham, for instance.
In Chaldea.
Yes, over 2,000 years before Jesus. A reformer there. It talks about a meteorite event connected to the Israelites forming.
Wow, okay. And Moses, of course.
Leading the Israelites from Egypt, establishing Jerusalem, Solomon's temple. Those key moments.
And the lesson connects this to other traditions, too.
It mentions the meteorite at Mecca, central to Islam, and points out the Quran draws from the first 5 books of the Bible, highlighting a sort of Christian-Muslim dichotomy, but also shared origins.
So interconnected histories, not totally separate paths.
That seems to be the implication. It even mentions counter-missionary efforts, like Paramahansa Yogananda coming from the East.
Blending Western science and Eastern ideas.
Exactly, showing that flow of ideas went both ways.
This all seems to build towards that central message you mentioned earlier.
The kingdom of heaven within. The lesson states that's the core message of all great avatars. And it says, Unarius' purpose is specifically to explain this inner kingdom, its function, composition, how it connects to our inner self.
Okay. What about understanding things like space? The lesson suggests science has limitations there too.
Yes, it views the current scientific understanding of space as vague and abstract. It mentions Einstein's work, but suggests mathematics alone can't fully solve it.
So space and the spiritual worlds are more complex.
Deeply abstract is how the lesson puts it, requiring extensive assimilation, maybe over many lifetimes, to truly grasp.
That's a big concept. It challenges purely immaterial explanations, doesn't it?
It really does. It suggests a different kind of awareness is needed.
The lesson also tackles the Immaculate Conception directly.
It does. It notes the idea was actually quite common in various traditions, from around 2000 BC up to 550 AD.
Not unique then. Where does it trace it back to?
Ancient Egyptian tombs, specifically. The story of Osiris, Isis, and Horus, where Horus was believed to be conceived miraculously, you could say, and acted as an intercessor for the dead.
So older roots for that concept too.
Okay.
How about the formation of the early Christian church itself? Paul's role.
The lesson discusses Saul, who became Paul, his initial opposition, then his conversion.
And his role in establishing the church, particularly in Greece.
The lesson characterizes him as a clever operator, someone who knew how to make the new religion attractive in what was a very competitive spiritual marketplace.
Attractive how? Did he borrow ideas?
That's what the lesson suggests, that Paul incorporated elements from other popular traditions of the time, like Mithraism.
Mithraism, what kind of elements?
Well, the Immaculate Conception belief was apparently part of Mithraism too, regarding Mithras himself, and also winter solstice observances.
Ah, connecting to Christmas, perhaps.
Potentially. The lesson describes those solstice rituals, a period of silence reflecting on sins, sacrifices, then a big celebration on December 25th. It also mentions Druid customs with similar timing and the Germanic tradition of offerings to the fir tree.
So the point is, many Christian customs might actually come from much older occult practices.
That's the assertion in the lesson, yes, a blending of traditions.
Okay, shifting gears a bit. The lesson also touches on conception from a more scientific or perhaps unconventional scientific angle.
It does. It brings up parthenogenesis, the biological possibility of an ovum developing without fertilization. It mentions experiments with frogs and rabbits showing this can happen.
Like natural potential.
Sort of. And then it proposes that masters, like Jesus, could have used something different. Projection of mind force, psychokinesis, basically.
To initiate conception, as a natural process known to them.
That's the idea presented. A natural process, just maybe not one commonly understood or accessed. And the lesson is quite clear that, in its view, the traditional theological idea of the Holy Ghost isn't correct here. It actually names Jesus' father as Unarius.
Right. That's a very specific point. Okay, let's broaden out again. What about the purpose of human existence, according to the lesson?
The teaching is that every human is created by infinite intelligence for evolutionary purposes. And this starts first in spiritual dimensions.
Before physical life.
Yes, it talks about the spiritual form, which is like the superconsciousness or the life cycle. It's described as an energy representation, sort of blueprint, holding future experiences.
And the goal of this evolution
is for humanity, through this process, to become the ultimate concept of God.
Wow. That's quite a statement on human potential.
It is. It reframes existence as this grand evolutionary journey.
Does the lesson connect this to more conventional scientific ideas about evolution? Darwin, genetics.
It mentions Darwin and Mendel, acknowledging their contributions to understanding creative processes and genetics. It also notes the conflict, like the Scopes trial, with fundamentalism.
But it suggests Darwin's view was incomplete.
Yes, because it lacked the concept of reincarnation, specifically within the plant and animal kingdoms as part of that evolutionary process.
Okay. So back to this idea of the missing link being energy, how does the lesson connect that to current problems?
It points to things like high rates of cancer and mental illness as evidence that something fundamental is misunderstood. The core premise is that understanding the spiritual energy behind every atom is the key.
To solving diseases like cancer, how?
It describes cancer as malformations in the harmonic frequency relationships within the atom structure, problems in the energy pattern. And it even states that the atom's true nature will remain a mystery until clairvoyance develops in science.
Because we can't perceive the energy directly yet.
That seems to be the idea. And this lack of understanding is linked to why we can't cure many diseases.
What about mental illness? What's the lesson's take on modern psychiatry?
It acknowledges the progress made, certainly better than past inhumane treatments. But it suggests psychiatry has kind of hit a wall, reached a point of diminishing returns because the fundamental causes still aren't grasped.
So what's needed?
The lesson argues psychiatry needs to revisit spiritual elements, maybe look again at the teachings of figures like Jesus for deeper understanding.
Interesting. It keeps coming back to integrating that spiritual or energetic dimension.
Absolutely. The lesson really emphasizes that atoms are spiritual energy. What seems solid is just a pulsating mass of energy.
And this understanding allows for unusual possibilities.
Yes, it uses the analogy of raising your vibrational frequency. That's how phenomena like walking on water or passing through walls could theoretically happen. It even attributes this ability to flying saucer men, implying beings who understand and manipulate energy.
And space isn't empty either.
Not at all, according to the lesson. It's filled with the infinite's radiant energy.
Okay. This is a lot to take in. Does the lesson promise more explanation on this energy concept?
It does. It mentions a future lesson that will explain energy, the atom, the sun, planetary systems, and the Christ self, using diagrams in clear terms. Understanding energy is presented as the absolute key to unlocking these future, higher dimensional concepts.
And it draws on established scientific figures, too.
Yes, it mentions Newton, Einstein, Planck, and others, suggesting their wisdom contributes to this larger picture.
What if all this feels overwhelming? Does the lesson offer any reassurance?
It does. It says the knowledge will be assimilated, even if you don't consciously realize it all right away,
Yeah.
through the psychic self.
So it works on a deeper level.
That's the idea. And that this assimilation can lead to a stronger connection with your higher self, positive life changes. It even includes a message of guidance and protection from loved ones who are in higher spiritual planes.
A sense of connection beyond the physical?
Yes, a feeling of support on this journey of understanding.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive for today, the main takeaway from this lesson seems to be, well, understanding energy is the key.
Pretty much. Bridging that gap between science and spirituality through understanding energy holds the key to deeper truths about, well, everything. Ourselves, the cosmos.
It definitely leaves you with something to think about. A provocative thought, perhaps.
I'd say so.
Hmm.
Maybe consider, if reality truly is energetic at its core, how does that change how you see the world, both the seen and the unseen?
A fundamental shift in perspective. And that's a good place to pause our exploration for now. We'll definitely be diving more into energy and these higher dimensions in the future.